Hello, my friends. Good afternoon. It's 2 o'clock, July 3rd, 2020. Welcome to this place of moment by moment. 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I don't know why I picked this time, but I'm glad I did. It feels like the morning, which for me begins around 5:30, sometimes 6 o'clock. The morning has a life all of its own. I watch the sun come up. I celebrate the presence of the light in this season. It really affects me in a positive way. And then there's breakfast, and then we get ready. I get ready to come to work and do a variety of things that I do. We're getting ready for the preschool. This church sponsors a preschool in North Haledon, which is designed to be an affordable option for working moms and dads who, especially single moms or single dads who have children. And how do you go to work and take care of your children? We try to insert ourselves as a church, as a staff, to make a difference for people so they can go to work and they can have a livelihood. And if the cost of the child care is so outrageous, which mostly it is, they can't afford that. So we make it affordable. We try. Mostly we lose money on the proposition. That's what has been happening for us now for 2 years. But it doesn't matter in the end. We're so happy for the families that we're able to care for and provide the connections for. And that's all part of the outgrowth of this compassionate community, group of people who want to make a difference. I've been the pastor here now I keep changing the number. I actually think it's 8 years. And it's July 3rd, which I've been looking around today and asking myself, why does this feel so unusual to me? Why is today different from every other day? That's what the child asks at the Passover celebration. Why is today different? Why tonight different than any other night of the year? And then the whole Passover story is related to the child, about God's saving acts and God's listening and hearing the cries of the oppressed, of the people who were living on this earth but deprived of the life. So, I know there's something big. There's a big times of the past when the colonies, the people that had traveled across the ocean, had arrived here, and they had tried to live under the tyranny, really, the taxation and the control of a country that was across the big pond, as they say. And then the sentiment rose to a point where, in spite of their deep-held belief that governments are put in place by God, and to rebel against the government was to rebel against God. This is deeply ingrained into the history, the sovereign history of the state's relationship to church and church relationship to state. And so, on July 4th, they declared that they were free. But this isn't July 4th. This is July 3rd, so what is it? What's bouncing off the walls of my life? What's tapping on the trees? And then I figured it out. In this congregation for 8 years, every year for 8 years, I wouldn't be here right now. I would be in the northern Appalachian region of Maine, and traveled up there every year. Took 10 days out of my life, my wife and I together, oftentimes one or more of my children. One time a group of just 8 of us, and then one time a group of 35. And then every year in between. It was, we've done it every year, and the reason we're not there right now is because of the virus. We're not there because of COVID. Whew. Same yawn, same time every day. So I don't know, what have you given up to this disease? What can't happen because of it? I think I mentioned yesterday there are graduations that couldn't happen. I don't know, parties that couldn't happen. And then there's graduations and parties that have happened and probably shouldn't have. Because now it looks like the disease is taking the opportunity when we're close. So what have you lost? It's a big loss for me, this not to be able to go on this week of contextual theology. That's what I call it. You never really know what you believe until you're digging a ditch behind an old woman's house who, I guess you would call it a house. It's a shack. But the rainwater has been running down off of these mountains and has been, when it rains hard, and it rains hard in the mountains, and the rain has been rushing up against the back side of her house. And it comes rushing in. It comes in right across her floor. And so when we went there, following the recommendation of the Board of Social Services, we agreed to dig a trench behind her house. Picks, shovels, buckets. We dug a trench. It was hot. It was blazing hot. But we had a lot of help and a lot of good ambition. You never really know what you believe about God or about people, I don't think, until you have a little contextual theological reflection. And to me, that's what a muddy ditch in the back of a poor woman's house does for me. It's especially important, too, the association that I was given with young people. People who are still looking around in life and trying to decide who they are and what they believe and what they think about the meaning of life and the purpose and direction of life. And there was always something very predictable, something always absolutely certain in that theological education. And that was that when you rub elbows, when you get shoulder to shoulder with each other in a work of love and a labor of compassion, and you really see the circumstances of people's lives that really have no hope of ever changing it. This woman was over 80 years old. She was bent over from age and the weight of her life. And there was no way she was going to change this condition. She had no money to move to another house. I don't think she even ever bought this house. She was a squatter in this house. She was just a life. She was a life that had landed there. And so we dug, and we dug, and we dug, and it only took us a day and a half. And we dug a trench to divert the water around the back of her house. We put in a big pipe, a percolating pipe, and then we carried buckets and buckets and buckets of gravel. The pathway up to her house was too steep for a dump truck or even a backhoe. So we took 5-gallon buckets and we carried them bucket lines, taking gravel up. We filled the back of that house with gravel and created a diversion so that her house could dry out, so that she wouldn't get so sick. So part of what's banging around in my life is those experiences, hundreds of experiences. In the 5 days and sometimes 4 days that we were there, we would almost always meet at least 3 or 4 families. And I've been going every week since I was here, but before that I had been going on mission trips like this, some down to Virginia and some to Kentucky, to the southern Appalachian regions, and I've been doing this for 30 years. 30 years, 1 week, 10 days of my life. I've been traveling to the context of struggle, the context of difficulty, and immersing myself in it. One year I talked my brother into going with me, and we did an adult trip. That year we did 2 weeks. I did one with youth and then another one with adults. And that year we were working with a young family that had a variety of really difficult medical conditions. The husband of the couple had was a severe diabetic. The woman, in the places that we go, we often meet people who are having really big challenges, how to cope. So anxiety disorders, debilitating fears that leave them trapped in their houses. So the roof on the house was just completely falling apart. There was just no way. It was not stopping any weather from coming inside. So my brother and I and 7 other adults, we tore off the old roof and we put on a brand new roof. And we did it with shingles that were donated from the lumber company, so they didn't match. But it was a pretty tall building, so it didn't really matter because they couldn't see it. The only people that would see the pattern that we put on the roof would be people in a helicopter or airplane that went over. And we worked out a pattern of a cross that when you were up there you could see. The colors were background and then the cross. We thought that was pretty sweet. It was so hot. I burned the bottoms of my hands, I burned my knees, but worked on we did. I'm not a fan of heights, but we worked up there, put that roof on. It rained several times. We sat on the porch and we talked with this couple about their life. They talked about God. They always brought up God, I guess because we were from a church. But they have a regular vocabulary about God and their life, and God concerned about what they're concerned about. It's amazing in context of real physical struggle. And they share their joy with us. These people, individuals, old women, old men, young couples trying to raise children, some of them with severe disabilities, some couples who couldn't have their own children, raising children from the community, always facing enormous challenges. And the contextual, theological education was the presence of joy. Joy, genuine joy in the lives of these people. I would say without visible cause. They knew their circumstances were challenging and difficult. They knew they were living with many, many conditions that were unacceptable. One older woman, 20 years ago, we met her, and she had a terribly deformed hip. She was probably 80 years old. And she lived alone in a house up at the end of the gully, up at the valley. And she had no bathroom facility working in her house. Her toilet and septic had stopped up and broke, and so when she had to use the bathroom, she would go out her back door, and there was, again, a very steep bank. She would, on her hands and knees, she would go up top of the bank to an area that she had set aside as her bathroom outside. So what's banging around in my mind today is July 3rd. On July 3rd, I'm normally loaded up with tools, covered with dirt, thinking concretely in new ways about Jesus and about Jesus' call, Jesus' love of the poor, thinking about my life, listening to the incredible insights of people as they come away from their regular life and into the lives of other people. I'm not saying other in the sense of, oh my gosh, it's terrible. It wasn't terrible. I can describe it as terrible, but it needed to be changed. And we did. We gave that woman a flushing toilet so that she could stay in her house. Imagine, summertime was one thing, in the wintertime. We left people with fixed sinks. The floors in bedrooms had broken through, so in order to get this one young teenage girl, in order to get into her bed, she had to put her shoes on this side of her room, and then she had to step on the floor rafters because there was no floor. And then her bed was situated on the last 2 planks that were still able to hold the bed for a while. Tore out the whole floor, the supports, put in new floor supports, put down new floorboards, and even then went out to the store and bought a pretty round rug, put it right in the middle of her room. I was always aware during that week, and still am, of how grateful I am for the skills that I have learned from others. I don't even know where, but a lot of people have taught me a lot of things about how to take care of myself and how to build. And this week, July 3rd, is where the grounding of my thoughts of God, my understanding of all the fancy theological language, either took hold or else the language was rejected. So that's what I've given up in the Lent that will never end. You remember this began during Lent, right? To give it up. And so the context is mine. My life. My dealing with loss. The uncertainty of future. Always live with it, not like this. I'm worrying about my people that I know, my extended family. Grieving the loss of my mother. Celebrating my life and friendship with my dad. What have you lost? What have you given up for COVID? It's always rich. The mission trips were rich in building relationships with young people and older people, the adults that went, the meals that we sat and talked and shared together, reflecting on the sources of poverty and solutions to poverty, the incredible accompaniment of poverty and disease. Can't have one without the other, it seems. So I'm missing my university, my week-long university contextual education. Instead, it's another week of reflection, just reflection, thinking and sharing. And I'm glad to share it with you. If you've been part of this every week, you know we travel in topics everywhere. Happy July 4th. And let us try to remember how close to the heart of God is freedom and the absence of oppression and the absence of tyranny. How close to the heart of God that is for human beings. And even though many institutions that have risen up in the name of God, of the divine, have themselves become oppressive and have tortured the human spirit and the human soul, God is still a lover of human beings. Human beings created to live in relationship to this beautiful garden in which we've been planted, and to live in relationship to each other in love and compassion and caring for the other when difficulty comes. So when we celebrate the 4th of July and the liberty and the freedom that were won for the colonists and then was inherited by me and by you, and has been had to be struggled for to keep and has lost some, let us remember how close to the heart of God freedom from all kinds of oppression is. Freedom from poverty, and freedom from illness, and freedom from oppression, and freedom from prejudice. To live our lives, to cast off the bonds and the shackles of our sometimes self-developed prisons. Happy 4th of July. I hope you find freedom. I hope you find freedom to live and to love and to grieve even if you need to. And that you find that becomes a contextual learning to bring you closer to the heart of God. Thank you, my friends. This brings us to the end of another week. Sunday is, in our virtual gathering, is a communion Sunday. We celebrate the Eucharist on the first Sunday of every month, and so we will do that this Sunday. You're invited to come. It's at 10:30. Get your piece of bread or cracker, or your juice or your wine, and be ready, and we'll sing some songs, we'll listen to some prayers, we'll strengthen each other in faith, and I'll even preach. And in it all, take another step towards the freedom in faith and through faith to be the fullest human beings we're called to be. It's on YouTube and on Facebook. You can go to the website for the church, highmountainpres.org, and scroll down to live, and there it will be at 10:30, maybe even a little bit before if we have some music we want to share to lead in. Okay, my friends, have a safe 4th of July. Remember, the governor and the governor of our state and other states are encouraging us, please, if you can, to do not join into big parties on this 4th of July. That's a step towards our eventual freedom from this disease. Wear your masks, wear your masks, wear your masks. Keep separation. Do the discipline that has brought us to this safer place and that will protect us from some of the places that are not safe right now. God bless you, my friends. I love you, I care about you, and I know I feel your love and care for me as well. Bye now.